Hi everyone, and welcome to our next edition of Meet the Creator picture book for August 2024. And I'm guessing you're all still on holiday, so I do hope you're having a great time and that the weather holds out. I am very happy this morning to be interviewing a debut picture book author. I'm going to be interviewing Farah Riaz this morning about her absolutely gorgeous picture book that she's going to tell us all about. So, Farah, good morning. Lovely to meet you.
Morning, hello. Nice to be here.
And would you be happy to give us a little bit of a reading to start us off, please?
Yes. So, the Twirly Wiggly Dance. Auntie Myra's here, Mum announced, with her wedding invitation. Oh, can I open it? Intezar asked. Of course, Auntie Myra replied. I also wanted to ask if you would like to be part of the big group dance with the Velima. We've chosen a popular song from a film. Yes, Intezar said. She loved to dance. What is the Velima? She asked. The Velima is the last party we have to celebrate the wedding, Auntie Myra explained. Before that, we'll have lots of other parties. That sounds fun, Intezar said. Auntie Myra gave Mum the song's name, and Intezar began practicing the routine. She rocked back and forth, slinked left and right, and jogged on the spot. Then there was a really complicated move she couldn't do. She got in a tangle, crisscrossing her feet, and nearly tripping over. Ah! But as she kept trying, twirling, wiggling, dancing, Intezar realized she had invented her own special move. It was much more fun. On the day before the first party, called the Mendi, Intezar asked Mum if she could have henna put on her hands. Yes, but you must sit still and wait for it to dry, Mum told her. I will, she replied. But it took a very long time for the henna to dry, and as she waited, she watched her older cousin Isla practice the dance with the Velima. She was very good. Later, they practiced together. They rocked, slinked, and jogged. It was going so well until the complicated dance move. Intezar tried it again, but she still got into a tangle, so she did her special twirly wiggly dance instead. That's not how you do it, Isla said. You have to do it exactly like the video. Look, I'll show you. Intezar tried until she felt dizzy, but she still couldn't do it. You have to do it properly, Isla said. You don't want to disappoint Auntie Myra, do you?
As this is your debut picture book, have you always wanted to write for younger children? And what have you been doing up until now?
So, when I was young, my cousin and I used to actually write short stories for each other. If you've ever read my biography, my little short bio, it says I used to love playing with Barbies. So we used to create these really intricate plot lines. We had like whole families of dolls and characters and what's happening, complicated relationships, the whole thing. And as we started getting older, you sort of put the Barbies aside, but we still loved the characters. So we used to still write each other's stories based on our own characters. And we did that for quite a while. And then you sort of start adulting and you grow up. And I sort of, always loved reading, but sort of writing wasn't something I really thought I would seriously do. I think it was just sort of something in the back of my mind. I enjoyed creative writing, but nothing that I would have sort of pursued at that time, just because of life and being an adult and other things going on. So my actual day job is in higher education. I've been doing that for just about over 20 years now. So higher education is very different, and I deal with mostly data and input. So it's very different to this. But as I said, at the back of my mind, I think the writing sort of, little sort of beacon was sort of flashing. And 5 years ago, I had my it's now or never moment where I was like, what is it that you want to do? Is there something that you still have left, you want to do? And I was like, yeah, I think I want to write. And it was a shock to everyone because I'd never said anything to anybody. So I really did have that moment that either you do this now or you just don't ever think about it ever again. And then that really actually made me sad. And I thought, no, I think I want to see what happens with this. And you don't know if you're any good because if you've never kind of pursued it and actually written something and had someone who doesn't know you read it, you don't actually know if you're a natural storyteller to other people other than what's going on in your own little head. So I'm very glad that I made that decision 5 years ago. It was a real, I think that it was something that I kind of pat myself on the back for, because you don't normally do that in life that much, sort of, feel proud of yourself. But I'm like, I'm so glad I did this, because I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't made that decision. And I remember that day very clearly. So I still remember it.
Well, I have to say, I'm very glad that you didn't make that decision, because the book is just wonderful, and I absolutely loved it. And of course, the story setting is a Muslim South Asian wedding, and I was absolutely fascinated learning about all the different ceremonies, of which there are many by the looks of it. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
So as I was growing up, there was always some kind of family relative wedding always happening, or you're always being invited. And actually, I only picked like the main four that it sort of seemed to be the common element in all the weddings. But actually, these can go on for like, you can have like 2 or 3 more events squeezed in. Like, so you always start with, in our family especially, we always start with the Mendi, but you can have an event before that, which is all about like the singing, where you have the people come over and it's just that singing section with women only, and you sort of do the dholak with the little drums. So you can do like the singing night, and then a couple of nights later you'll do the henna night. And if it's sort of boy and girl like separately, then they'll have something going on in their house, you'll have something in your house. And then yeah, and then I think you probably can have something else in between. But I think the whole point, I think, for South Asian weddings, it's supposed to be a really big celebration. So they can go on for weeks. And so it's as many, as much as sort of you can afford to do them anyway. But it's about just having how many family members come together, and people want to do like even sort of, going out to buy outfits is a real special thing. So um, they can go on for a while, but I just picked the most common ones. That the Mendi is a very important kind of henna ceremony, but in a lot of families, in our family, we kind of started doing them jointly. So it's actually really nice having the mixed groups of the bride and groom together, because then you have like a really big party when you're doing the sort of dancing elements, and you're decorating plates and stuff. And it's a whole, oh, and you can have the day where you're doing all the party favors and decorating. Like that can be a whole night before
Yeah.
the Mendi itself. So there's a lot to do. But the nikah is like the actual Islamic wedding. And then the registry, obviously, like, because you always do the registry. So that sort of gives you a chance of wearing a different outfit, and like, having different people invited, because you can invite different people at different pockets of it as well. And
Yeah.
then the big reception is the walima, which is what people would like normally do, registry, and then the big kind of, party. So the walima kind of acts like the reception, where you can then invite everybody
Yeah.
in your life and have the big party at the end. So it was just important for me to share my own experiences, and how I sort of see South Asian weddings. But I mean, of course, not all South Asian weddings are exactly like this. Some don't have dancing at all. Some have much more kind of elements than I have included. But yeah, I think I tried to just pick the main four that I could think of that would be most common, that people would recognize.
I must admit, I do like the idea of having lots of different outfits.
No, that's part of the fun. Honestly, it's part of the fun. I mean, I think sort of guys get to wear sort of different outfits as well, but just not as much of the women, because, there's so much accessories that can go with it, and you can match things with the bride, and you can sort of match outfits with each other. And especially like I did it in the Valima, but you can do this whole sort of choreography where you all wear matching outfits, and you're kind of, sequence and stuff. So
So
I've seen
cool.
really, yeah, like elaborate ones. I mean, you could YouTube them and it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed getting outfits when I was younger.
So the whole message of the story is very much about being your own authentic self, and about celebrating your differences. Why was that an important message for you?
So I think sometimes as a child, you sometimes think that everyone lives like you, and then you start to realize the little differences. And obviously, depending on your environment, but a lot of children, and even when you sort of get older and you're sort of preteen, you just want to fit in.
Yeah.
Like you just want to be part of the gang, and like everything you want, like, should be the same. And as an adult, sort of looking back at it, and even though I read really widely and like I read a lot about feisty characters, but I was trying to think of like, had I had those kind of books when I was growing up that said it's completely okay to be different and doing your own thing and celebrate it. So I think it just was something I just naturally wanted to, I think, portray in this sort of book, because I mean I'd written a lot of drafts on the course that I kind of did about picture books. And so this was one of the ideas that sort of came up naturally while we were talking. And it was something that always stuck in my head that, as I said, like, because I'm not actually any good at following sequences or dancing at all, routines, I just can't keep it in my head. But I love dancing, and I thought, wouldn't it be just nice to show a little girl in a really positive way that loves dancing but kind of does her own moves, and then have the family support that, rather than like, all of them are saying, no, you've got to do it, because it's not an exam. And I sort of want to stress that it's supposed to be a joyful celebration. And I think it's lovely to celebrate children's own creativity and what they sort of, the personalities really do shine through when they're doing their like unique little things. And so there's lots of stuff obviously they have in common with other children, but everyone's got their own unique little thing. And I think rather than sort of saying, stop doing that, or you got to do it like this, they're not hurting anyone and you just want to celebrate it. So I think it was important for me. And especially, it was really lovely for this to be the first book that came out that, my agent and I spoke about. And I remember when we were talking, and I actually had only done 11 spreads. So I had a whole spread, and I was like, wow, what freedom. Like, well, that's amazing. Because, as a picture book writer, you're limited, aren't you? And
Yeah.
we were talking about it, and it was the spread actually that her family, when her brother says, shall we practice together? And I bet we all have our special moves. And I'm so glad that then we got the space and the freedom to show that spread, because it's so important, where they all kind of celebrate their own special moves and show Intezar and say, we all can do our own thing. And then, she's not feeling it at that point, because she's like, well, I don't want to disappoint Auntie Myra. But it was important to bring that in early in the book, and then you can kind of, tie it back in at the end. So, yes, sorry, that's to answer your
No,
question.
definitely. That
Okay.
relationship between her and her brother is lovely. It's a really nice relationship, and I think you've brought that across really, really well. Um,
Yeah.
I found the notes at the back of the book very helpful, and I think they'd be very useful if you were using the story in a school setting. Was having these discussion points and information your idea, and how do you envisage them being used by readers?
So it was completely my idea. And I have to say, and I don't think any people would mind me saying it at all, that 99% of that text that I wrote in that first draft has stayed the same with all that back
Yeah,
matter. Because I think I wrote the story first, and it was just something that felt really natural to have these sort of the back matter explain what is a Mendy. So I think I was thinking about my friends' children, and though they are aware of obviously having South Asian children in their class, like they hadn't actually been to a big South Asian wedding. And I think I was just sort of speaking in my head to the children that would be curious and would love to find out more. And it just was really natural for me to write it in my own voice and have mentioning the characters, say Auntie Myra, Intezar, Mum. And so including the characters in the story and bring it into the back matter so they can relate it. So if like the adult is reading with them, they can say, oh, and we flip back to the Mendy page and you can see like, they're walking around with little tinsel plates, and you can kind of tie it together. So I felt it was just important that I explained it in a way that felt accessible,
yeah,
but in my own way. And that text has hardly changed. We've just kind of moved it because of commas and like, the illustrations coming in. But I'm really sort of chuffed that it actually hasn't changed. And they hadn't even said anything about it changing. And they said it fit the tone and the voice of the story. And for children who are familiar with it, they can just sort of, get a bit more out of it, because they're like, I know what Mendy is. And it's been so nice when I've been doing these school visits library visits and shop visits for a whole week now, that the ones who recognize these weddings, they're like, immediately like, oh, I get, henna and stuff. So I wanted it to work for all children, whether you're familiar with it or not. So yeah, it was important to me. And I think if we do get a chance for it to be read in schools, I just, naturally, when you finish the story, I'm doing it now as well, and when I'm doing events, so then you sort of flip through the pages at the back and you
Yeah.
say, do you remember that, when they had the Mendy and this is what happened? So I just think it's really nice to learn about different cultures in a sort of positive way and sort of celebrate it. So it's not to try and teach them, it's just an opportunity to learn about another culture that you might not be familiar with. So I think that was why it was, really important to me. But it was just natural. It was part of the sort of whole story of how I explained it. So it wasn't something I kind of went, oh, I should do this. It was I just did it automatically straight after I finished the draft of the story. I automatically then wrote all of that text out. So yeah.
And it does feel that way as well. It doesn't feel teacherly, if you like. It is a natural progression on from the story. So that's great. Absolutely great. So now you did use the word joyful just now. And I have to say, Navya Raju's illustrations perfectly bring that word to mind. They are so bright and colourful and charming. And I'm sure you must be delighted with them. But do they match up to how you saw the characters in your head?
So Navya and OUP was so supportive and accommodating. I look back at it and thought they must have been like, Forrest, stop. I sent them so many mood boards of my family. And so I think the four main characters, Intizar, Mum, her older brother Taj, and Auntie Myra, these were the four characters that I'd said right from the beginning and requested to say I would love those characters to be based on my family. So I sent them tons of mood boards, like, me at age 5 and 6, and then like, all my family. And they were so lovely and accommodating. And so what they had said, and we always knew we were going to have a South Asian illustrator. So what they did was get samples of lots of illustrators, and then they said, choose who do you think speaks to you the most. And Navya had seen the mood boards already, so she did this fantastic kind of, little sample of having those four main characters. And I said they can do what they want with Isla. So she then had, Isla at the end as well. And I had never imagined what we would look like in illustration mode. Like I hadn't actually thought about how we would look as like, little illustrations. And it was just amazing because I'm only giving the photos and I want them loosely based on like, characters that I'm sort of saying, I mean, family members that I would like them to be based on. But I hadn't thought about what would happen if you actually draw Mum and what she would look like. And so I'm glad I didn't have that expectation at all. And so when Navya did it, it was just so obvious that it was going to be Navya right from the beginning. And then what we just worked on is just tweaking little, very tiny details and stuff. And it's just been amazing. And it's been such an Easter egg for my whole family because, they like can recognize themselves and they're like, oh, that's me. I remember at the launch, they were like, do you recognize Taj? Because, and I was like, well, that was you probably 40 years ago, but yeah, but it's just been amazing. I mean, picture books are such a collaboration and such a partnership.
Yeah.
And, yes, it was my idea and yes, it's my text, but having Navya and be part of the book, it's 50%, it's all her as well. And just those illustrations bring everything to life. So I think, just the tiny details and the characters in the background, like actually there's so much fun because we've all got like a little favorite characters in the background as well, and she's put in so much detail of like the smiling clock faces, the little kind of mice and the little toys and stuff, and the detail is incredible. And I mean, I know when she speaks as well, she said she also did mood boards. I mean, she's South Asian, so she understands weddings and stuff, but even she was like, mood boards and this and that and bangles and tweaking the little details. And they were so kind. They included me every step of the way. We were always going back and forth with little details and like, that was drawn in. And we're talking about accessories with the bit, characters in the back as well, like with her earrings and her bangles and, his tattoo and this, that. So Navya's, I mean, she's an incredible talent and she's, going to be amazing. So I'm so happy that she's, part of my debut experience. So she's brilliant.
Well, as I say, joyful is definitely the right word. Definitely the right word. The entire book, text and pictures, is just completely joyful. So, are we allowed to ask what you're working on next, or is it a secret at the moment?
Not a secret. So I am actually on submission with 2 picture books, and you know what the submission process is like. So that's ticking away in the background. But I'm glad actually I'm really busy and not thinking about it. But I have a lot of picture books also in the back in full draft form, ready to go. I also really like writing short stories, whether they're sort of for adults or middle grade. And I'm also working on adult sci-fi novels in the background. So I feel greedy, and I like novellas as well. So I feel very greedy. I feel like I want to do lots of things. It's just about finding the time to finish all these little projects that I've started, and then also getting them to a standard that I'm ready to share it with my agent. So I've got a lot of stuff that I want to write. So yeah, it's not a secret. Just I'm doing it all in the background. It's simmering, and hopefully one day, as you know what publishing is like, so one day you'll hear from me again, I hope.
You are very much a lady after my own heart. Well, I've got this and I'm doing this as well, and I'm doing this as well. So I fully understand that. It's, focusing on the one thing and finishing that. That's the difficult thing. That's the difficult thing. Well, unfortunately, our time has run out. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you, Farah. And I do hope that we get to see more picture books from you, because absolutely loved it. So obviously, we wish you all the best of luck with this picture book, and hope to be talking to you again. Perhaps when the sci-fi one comes out. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, let's watch this space and see. But thank you very much for having me and having me talk about my debut. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hi everyone, welcome back to our next edition of Meet the Creator Middle Grade. And I am thrilled to be talking to Catherine Bruton today about her absolutely amazing middle grade book, Bird Boy. Believe me, guys, you need to read this one. So welcome, Catherine. It's so lovely to have you here. Are you okay to start us off with a reading, please?
Oh, I'd love to. So shall I give you a little bit of context? This is the story of 11-year-old Will, and after the tragic death of his mother, he's sent to the Lake District to live with his uncle, who he's never really met before. And he spent years trapped in a high-rise flat with only the birds for company. So he's quite overwhelmed by the space and the outdoors. And he encounters a little boy called Omar, who is a refugee from Afghanistan, and together they stumble across an osprey nest. So I'm going to read you a little bit about from near the beginning of the book. The next day at nature camp, Will and Omar were put on amphibian watch, which meant helping newts and toads cross the road to get to their breeding grounds. Carrie-Anne had explained to them how the natterjack toad was an endangered species, threatened nearly to extinction by the building of roads across ancient breeding paths, and Omar had got really excited about Operation Toad Rescue. Do you know that Carrie-Anne found some more bird books for you, said Omar, who was busy making a chariot to transport newts, using sticks and a Coke bottle dropped by a careless walker. Most of the other kids had wandered off, but Omar had spent ages fashioning his contraption with meticulous care, like an engineer or a model maker. You didn't tell her, did you? He looked up from what he was doing. About the osprey nest? Will shook his head. Did you? Omar pulled his face. No way. She was saying last night about how unsuitable High Gable is for novice climbers. If she finds we've been up there, she'll probably make us do litter picking for the rest of our lives. My mum says, when we die, we all come back as birds, said Will. Then he paused and frowned. That'd be kind of cool, said Omar, looking up from his chariot and flapping his arms. Then he paused and frowned. Although, I suppose it depends what kind of bird. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a chicken, or an ostrich for that matter. Did you know that ostriches can't even fly? But they can run faster than cheetahs. This was followed by an impression of what looked like a headless chicken with very long legs running around in a giddy circle, squawking madly and flapping useless wings. I think our nest is a new one, said Will. How'd you figure that? Omar paused his ostrich chicken impression with a final plaintive squeak. Monitored birds have blue rings on their legs with an identifying number, said Will, so they can be tracked. But I didn't see rings on either of the adult osprey, did you? Omar dusted himself down and gave a quick shake of his head and then a quizzical sniff. Do you really think we're the only people who know about this nest? I think we might be the only ones who know those ospreys even exist. Omar surveyed Will with his big eyes sparkling in his round face. Why are you so into birds anyway? Will shrugged. I don't know, why are you so interested in newts? Oh, well, I reckon Carrie Ann will probably say it's a metaphor, said Omar, popping a snail onto the newt carriage and wheeling it around on the dust to see if his contraption worked. Metaphor? Omar made himself look and sound like Carrie Ann. Well, the newts are migrating, he declared, wheeling the little newt chariot across a pile of rocks. They face a perilous journey, fraught with dangers in order to find a safe haven. Will looked confused. So it's like me, right? Said Omar, back to himself again with a grin. I am a newt. Right? Because of the war in Afghanistan? Omar looked at Will impatiently. Because I had to leave my home and flee for safety as a refugee and make an epic journey, so I am like the newts, right? Right, said Will again. He didn't really know anything about the war, and he hadn't asked the younger boy anything about really why he'd left his home. But suddenly an image flashed into his mind of Omar as a newt on board a Coke bottle chariot fleeing from bombs and fighting. So if I'm a newt, said Omar, pulling a newt face, maybe you are a bird. Why? Well, you had to leave your nest, said Omar, and you're learning to survive on your own, getting ready to spread your wings and migrate to the other side of the world, because Carrie Ann said you're going to Melbourne soon. The reminder made Will's stomach lurch painfully. Maybe Omar was right. They were all on journeys. His was different to Omar's, but also the same in some ways. You're still thinking about those baby osprey, aren't you, said Omar. He'd abandoned his construction and was sitting upright, staring at Will. How can you tell? Will you stop doing that tapping thing with your fingers, said Omar. And Will looked down at his hand and realised he was right. You want to go up there again today, don't you, said Omar, to see the nest or the eyrie or whatever you call it. Will nodded. He'd been thinking about it all morning. I knew it, bird boy, said Omar, his moon face one big smile. Well, you'll need some company or you'll get lost and we'll have to call mountain rescue, and then Carrie Ann will ground me forever. And then who will look after the natterjack toads?
Wonderful. Now, I could just sit here for the rest of the time and let you read to me, really, because absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. So am I right in thinking, are you still working as a teacher as well as being an author?
I am, yes. I work 3 days a week as a teacher and 2 as an author, or, well, I juggle it somehow most of the time.
I think you must be a multitasking expert. I really do.
Sometimes, but sometimes I drop all the juggling balls. So, and you should see the state of my cupboards is usually my answer to that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, there are, I said to you before we started the interview that I am sitting here feeling very fangirlish, and I can't express enough how much I loved the book. It made me feel lots of things, and we'll go into that a little bit later on. But it's also a very hopeful book, and that I love. I absolutely love that. And there are, of course, so many powerful themes in Bird Boy. You know, we've got grief, we've got refugees, and we've got mental health, to name just a few. But I think what came over strongly to me was one of them was the power of friendship and the difference it makes to the boys, and also the healing that nature can provide. Why are those themes so important to you?
Well, the book was first inspired actually by a friend of mine who works for Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. She was working on a project using nature therapy with traumatized children, and many of whom were actually unaccompanied minors, refugee asylum seekers like Omar in the book. And she very much said to me that this is a story that needs to be told. That kind of was playing around in my mind. I started writing the book just after lockdown, and as a teacher, what I witnessed was an absolute epidemic of mental health issues amongst young people. Many of them actually, I mean, it's been growing over the last decade, and that's really heartbreaking to watch. It was particularly heartbreaking to watch amongst, I think, a younger cohort, seeing it much more amongst boys. And I felt as a teacher a responsibility to help. As a teacher and a writer, I felt a responsibility to help, and I know the power that stories can have in helping young people find a vocabulary to articulate what they're going through and to help them work through things. And so everything sort of came together. And I think what I also witnessed was, that being stuck inside and being cut off from their friends, exactly what you identified, those were absolutely key to so many children being so unhappy. And Will in the book has also been locked down for different reasons, and it's him re-emerging, re-engaging with nature, re-engaging with Omar, and with the bird, and those things are healing forces for him. And that's what I witnessed. And I went to an incredible trauma-informed schools workshop that said the key thing to helping young people work through, one of the key therapeutic tools, can be to tell them stories and let them tell their stories. And so it's a book that I hope is in itself a part of that. It might be the first step to a healing journey for a young person as well. So yeah, that was why.
Absolutely wonderful. One of the things that I and I love all of your books, so I'm coming from not just this book, of all of your books. But one of the things I love most about your writing in particular is that even when you're writing about potentially distressing themes and very deep themes, you never dumb things down, if you know what I mean. You trust that your readers can understand these issues without sugarcoating. Is that something you feel strongly about?
Yeah, well, again, as teacher, I think I see people should never underestimate young readers. In fact, many ways, what I see in the classroom all the time is the real openness of young people as readers. I'm part of an adult book group whom I love, and they're amazing readers, intelligent people. But I'm not sure that they are as open to new ideas as the young readers that I encounter, because I think that the books you read, particularly in this middle grade era, they're the books that open your eyes, they make you ask questions, they expand your horizons, they perhaps introduce you to things that you didn't know were going on in the world, and you're confronted for the very first time with those really big questions. But by doing it through fiction, you're allowed to do that in a sort of safe way. You can climb into someone else's shoes and walk around in them for a bit, and you can ask those big questions. And what I see is young people's incredible willingness to ask questions of themselves and about the world. And it's just a huge privilege as teacher to be introducing them to those stories, and as writer to maybe write stories that might do that for them. But yeah, no, anyway, yeah, young people are some of the most discerning readers around. They if they don't think a book's any good, they'll just put it down, won't they? So you've got to write well for them and keep them gripped. So yeah.
That is very, very true. There's no maybe liking a book with kids, is it? It's they either like it or they don't, and they stop reading.
Yeah.
Totally agree. So the osprey has, of course, got a particular significance to Will. Can you explain what that is for those of us that hadn't read the book?
So Will stumbles across the osprey nest as I was reading, and one stormy night, without giving away too much, tragedy almost strikes, and Will finds himself, and I should point out this moment, it is absolutely illegal ever to touch an osprey or an osprey's nest, which the book does point out, but in case you haven't read it, but Will breaks the law in order to try and save the osprey, with quite complicated consequences for himself. But in trying to save the osprey and to help it heal and take flight, he himself, it's part of his healing journey as well. So there's very much a parallel between the healing, the scars they're both overcoming, and their ability to sort of take flight at the end of the book.
You write very, very movingly and with such insight about how Will copes with, or starts to cope, shall we say, with the loss of his mum and the grief that he feels. Does this come from your own experiences, or does it come from seeing how children that you're in contact with have dealt with it?
So I suppose, yes, I lost my own father, but I mean, nearly 20 years ago, but you never stop grieving. It's not something that goes away. It's always part of you, isn't it? And again, as teacher, what I see is the power of, it's almost impossible to teach any text to children without there being actually, there's so often lost parents, it's actually the staple of children's literature, isn't it? Is the orphan trope. So from now can't think of any, from Harry Potter to James Bond, that's central to it, to Hamlet as well. To the texts I teach at GCSE, I invariably am teaching texts that are about grief, and invariably teaching them to young people who have perhaps experienced loss themselves. And what I see is just actually how powerful that can be, allowing them to explore the different ways that we grieve, some of which are socially acceptable and seem palatable, and how we ought to grieve, and others of which don't, the uglier side of grief that perhaps we don't want to show to the world, and or the phases that can go through. I think it is, and some people can talk about it and some people can't. And so, Omar and Will are very different, aren't they, in their perspectives, but are able to perhaps help each other. I always think we should have, someone said to me once, we should have grief elders in our society. And as someone who lost a parent quite young, I often encounter a lot of people who are and we're not very good at talking about it in Britain. And I think I always wish we were in the Victorian times when we could wear black all the time and everyone would know you were grieving. And I think you can be a grief elder. You can be someone who helps people to talk about grief. And I guess books is one of the ways you do that. I never really thought about that before, but yeah.
There are obvious nods in the book to Kestrel to a Knave.
Yes.
We know that comes in. Yeah. But for me, your writing is also reminiscent for me of animal books that I read when I was young. So, it reminded me very much of Richard Adams, for example.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So were these writers and books influences for yourself? Yeah,
no, they are. Animal books, I think, are central to everyone's growing up, aren't they? And I was trying to think of, that from Watership Down for me, or Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, that I think they're so central. And actually, writing the book, I ended up doing quite a lot of research on the importance of children-animal relationships and how important that can be in helping young people through all sorts, whether it's mental health or just life. So I think I absolutely was nodding towards those. I think we're all I think I'm constantly influenced by the books that I read at this age, actually.
Yeah.
So I think we all are. Yeah.
I definitely think so. I mean, for myself, it started me thinking back to the animal books that I loved when I was that sort of age. And I can remember a book called, and I don't even remember the author, but you may have heard it, My Friend Flicker.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Forgotten that, but I love that. Yeah.
Which had a huge influence on me when I was that age. And your book definitely had echoes of that sort of feeling, and the relationship between the child and the animal was really remind me of that, which was a joy. It was an absolute joy. I can't actually finish, however, without saying to everybody, yes, this is an emotional roller coaster, this book. It is an emotional roller coaster, and it's beautifully written. It is absolutely beautifully written. But it is also a book that is infused with hope and with family and with warmth. And, they are the overriding things I've taken away from it. It's that whole hopefulness and the fact that we are all part of not just a physical family, a familial family, but also the community as well. And I love the way the community all came together. Mm. So now, I did say I wouldn't gush. I have gushed. Really sorry. Can't help it. But it's been absolutely lovely talking to you about it, Catherine. But what are you working on next? I'll be allowed to ask.
Yes. So I'm writing a book, provisionally, I think, called Tadpole Summer, which features similar themes, actually. It's about a girl who's I haven't talked about this before, who's got a very sick brother who she's always been a carer, and who's facing possibly his imminent death, and she goes out into the garden and starts camping. And it's another book actually about the healing power of nature, but it's actually about sort of nature very much in your back garden, and the changing seasons and the power of that.
Well, we are very much looking forward to reading it. But thank you very much for giving up your time to speak to us. And thank you for writing the book, because it is sublime.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to interview. Lovely to chat to you.